Hi, everybody. Hi, hopefully you can hear me just fine. My name is Suzie Dawson. I am an activist, a journalist, and the leader of the president now of the Internet Party of New Zealand. I'm also organising the Unity for J movement, and hopefully you would have seen quite a bit of our content over the last few months, pumping out around social media and on Twitter in particular, and hopefully seen some of this Vigil series that we're continuing today. So I am very pleased and proud to have with me Joe Lauria. Joe is the editor-in-chief of the incredible Consortium News, which you can find at consortiumnews.com. Consortium News has a very long legacy of credible investigative journalism going back some decades now. And Joe, you can hear me fine, I hope, and you're with me on the stream?
Yes, I can, Susie. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to be handing over to Joe pretty soon. I'm only making a bit of a cameo appearance on this stream today, but I'm just wanting to catch you guys up on a bit of what's been happening in our movement and where we're going from here. So you may be aware we've been doing really marathon online vigils every month. They've been getting longer and longer and longer. Last month we did some 50 hours. We've decided this month and going forward to cut the duration down a bit. Today we'll be doing about 12 hours of live interviews with vigil participants. The reason for this is because we have a very clear mandate from those who love Julian Assange and who are closest to Julian Assange, such as his legal team, his colleagues, and his mother, that we need to urgently raise on the ground support and solidarity for Julian to help to get him out of the horrific situation of his arbitrary detention in the Ecuadorian embassy, to protect his life and to stand up for his human rights, his freedom of speech, and for the freedom of press in general. So to do that, we are moving our online activism into on-the-ground activism. Joe Booth, I'm being told that there is no sound. Is that correct?
I'm 90% sure there's sound, but it might need to be.
Okay, sorry guys, I just got a message that there is no sound. Can you please let our admins know in the YouTube chat whether or not you can hear me? Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to continue. So tomorrow we have got our very first ever Unity for J Day, where we will be having decentralized actions taking place in countries on all four corners of the globe in support of Julian Assange. We will have people hanging banners from overpasses. We will have people chalking pavement. We will have people singing songs about Julian and doing musical performances. We have all manner of actions being taken. I know there's an amazing group of people in NYC who will be out there handing out pamphlets packed full of information about Julian's situation and why it's so important that we collectively rise together in support of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. So you will see some promo videos have come out today and some graphics about that, and there will be a ton of noise being made tomorrow. So what we're looking to do is to periodically have our vigil, our online vigil event, as we usually do, but then to immediately follow that up with these on-the-ground actions in person all around the world. And we don't just have to protest at the embassies. Sometimes the most effective protest can be not where the seat of government is, but where the people are. So I'm encouraging people to take action wherever there is the largest amount of civilian population present, whether it's at a tourist location, whether it is just, on the busiest street that you can find. But we need to engage regular everyday people, let them know what's really going on, and recruit them into the movement and help to build this movement. At that point, that's when we'll begin to really have impact in terms of applying political pressure to the government, where we can build a mass movement of people working together to free Julian. So I want to thank you all for being here and for being a part of this. We have had the privilege of working with hundreds and even thousands of volunteers over the last 4 months who have built the bones of this incredible movement. And we are still young, we're still at the beginning of this journey, but we have already made some very serious gains towards creating public visibility of our support for Julian, showing people that it is socially acceptable to take a stand for a persecuted publisher, for someone who himself has protected the lives of other whistleblowers and other at-risk journalists. And it's now our turn to stand up and to protect his life and to fight for his freedom so that he can continue to provide the services to humanity that he has been now for so many years. So thank you. I'd like to congratulate you for being a part of this. I would like to ask you, please, to take these messages that you find on #Unity4J hashtag, spread them all over the internet, tell your friends and family, because you know and I know that you won't hear about this on CNN tonight. You won't hear about this on the BBC. They will not tell you that this is happening. You will only know from word of mouth or from your own initiative and following credible news sources like Consortium News or like WikiLeaks and Julian Assange's account, who have been wonderful about promoting the work that we're doing in this movement and helping to give us a leg up. So we have an amazing schedule today of guests. You will get to see them interacting with each other in a way that we really haven't done before. Rather than just having one host sit here and do interview after interview, today our guests will interview each other. And that is something that I'm personally really looking forward to seeing. We have a lot of older faces that have been on previous vigils, but we have some new faces as well that have been attracted to participate in this vigil by the success of our previous events. So that again is testament to the impact that collectively our actions are having and are taking. We are seeing already this movement grow, and I'm extremely proud to be a part of it. So with that, I'd like to have a quick chat to Joe. Joe, tell us a bit about what has attracted you to the Unity4J movement, that you'll take your time out to help to participate and to organise and for this cause.
Well, thank you, Suzie. I think what attracts me personally is that I'm just going to try to do my job as a journalist and now as an editor of Consortium News to do what you just said the BBC, the CNN, and the New York Times is not doing, which is to cover a story not only that affects the entire population of the world in terms of people around the world learning what their governments are doing, which the press is not telling them as they used to, but that WikiLeaks has, but also it affects themselves. It affects the New York Times, it affects CNN, it affects BBC, it affects any media outlet that routinely publishes classified information that's given to them by a leak. Under the US laws and the First Amendment, if they haven't themselves stolen that information, that's the real crime, stealing classified information. But of course, the public interest rises above that theft often. But in any case, legally speaking, it is not illegal for the New York Times, CNN, BBC, or WikiLeaks to publish the classified information. This has never been prosecuted by the US government. And therefore, they should all be supporting Julian Assange right now. It shouldn't have to only come down to people chalking up sidewalks and singing songs, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm glad it is, because that's the spark that you're creating, Suzie, that could lead to a mass movement, which is what is absolutely needed to have any kind of effect here. That's what we've seen in history, whether it was the women's movement or civil rights in the US or the anti-Vietnam War movement or the campaign for nuclear disarmament in the 80s. Whenever there's been a large mass of protesters and sustained, we see that the people who are being protested against have to react. There's that famous clip from Nixon's tapes when he's, I think, talking to Kissinger in the Oval Office about the protests that he can hear. They could both hear outside their window in Lafayette Park, across the street from the White House. They get the message if it's loud enough and long enough. And that's what we need to see here. And I think it's really important, Suzie, that you pointed out the non-ideological aspect of all this, that people who come on this vigil are asked to keep their personal political views outside. Because this is not about pushing one political agenda or not. This is not a partisan issue. This is not a Democrat or a Republican issue here in the US, or a Labor or conservative issue in the UK or in Canada or anywhere in the world. It is about a bipartisan, across the board issue of freedom of the press and the right to know what our governments are doing, what they're hiding from us. It's really not a left-right issue at all. It's a have or have not issue, as many people have put out. There are the haves and the have-nots right now. That's how the world's being increasingly divided, and not only by money and wealth and property, but by information. There's the haves who have the information, and there are the have-nots, the rest of us. And one reason we are have-nots is because the traditional media has not done their job, as they did previously better in many instances, of probing into what government's up to. And that's where WikiLeaks comes in. It helps the have-nots to have information, and we need more of that. And that's why we have to stand up for the right of WikiLeaks to continue its work, and for its publisher to be freed, to be able to leave that embassy and not be arrested, or if he has to go pay off that fine for the skipping bail, whatever that minor charge was in the UK, that he does that and then is allowed to be a free person in Australia, returns his passport, and we move on from here. But of course, we know very clearly that there appears to be an indictment, sealed one, maybe right here in Northern Virginia, where I'm speaking to you all from, that and the UK would most likely extradite him to the US. I mean, the new foreign secretary said a couple of weeks ago that when Julian Assange leaves the embassy, he'll get a warm welcome from the British police. So that was very ominous and quite sinister remark by the foreign secretary. And if he was extradited to the U.S., the chances of him having a free trial, a fair trial, of there being a trial at all, of him being treated under the law, in other words, not to be abused. These are all things we have to doubt that would happen. Unfortunately, given what happened to Chelsea Manning, for example, when she was in custody. So it's a very critical situation. I'm really happy you're starting this on the ground movement, because that's when they're going to hear it. I'm sure they're listening to this. They have assigned someone on a Saturday afternoon, probably up at Fort Meade in the National Security Agency, to watch our 12-hour vigil, or at least they're recording it. But it's the on the ground-ish movement that's going to make a difference. This is inspiration, what we're doing right now online, to get people to get out there on the street. And that's why Suzie's being freed, hopefully, although she spent like most of last week putting this together anyway, from having to run this. And I'm really being asked to do a minimal job here, which is to be interviewed by Suzie and then interview our first guest. Then there's going to be this tag team where they interview each other. And I'm really excited to see that happen. I wanted to make one remark about a story that Gareth Porter has written that we're going to republish on Consortium News in a day or two, maybe even later today, which is quite interesting, because I've been saying for the past months that the 2016 election in the US really scared the hell out of the establishment, both Republican and Democrat, and that they have to respond to this somehow. And instead of the Democrats in particular changing their platform and their positions back to what it was during the early days of the Democratic Party after the New Deal, where they were linked to labor parties, and there was a working class representation there. Under Bill Clinton in the 90s, it moved to the center. Same way Tony Blair moved the Labor Party to the center, and they took on neoliberal economic policies, i.e. get government out of regulating the economy and protecting vulnerable people and letting the free market have its complete run. And we know what the results of that have been, this growing inequality. So that was confirmed what I was saying. I was just saying by observing situation, but Garrett's story confirms that the two big think tanks, one on the Republican side, one on the Democratic side, have in fact written a study in which they are very well aware of these popular movements, how dangerous it is to elite interests, and how they have to respond to it. So look forward to seeing that article on Consortium News. And this is what it's about. This is a bipartisan effort to get defense of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks so that the public can remain informed about what our governments are up to in defense of those establishment interests.
Oh, you're just so spot on. Like, I just completely agree with absolutely everything that you said there. It is going to take a mass movement. It is going to take a movement of the people. If we sit around and wait for our governments to just have a crisis of conscience, well, I don't think that's ever happened in human history. Change only comes when it is driven by the people on the streets. And you see that transition even when, I know coming from New Zealand, the generation of activists prior to me were the ones that drove both the anti-apartheid movement and the movement against nuclear weapons in New Zealand waters. And they fought for 8 years, particularly to get the US nuclear warships out of New Zealand waters. 8 years of arrests and mass civil disobedience and a huge amount of pushback from the government before the government finally gave way, but then pretended like it was all their idea to pass this anti-nuclear legislation. And so it really does take us putting ourselves on the line. And the more of us that get together and do that, the safer all of us are. And I personally, this is my last word because I know our first guest has already arrived, but I personally believe that it is time that we stood up and fought for those who fight for us, and that's precisely what Julian Assange has been doing. He has put himself on the line and has fought for everybody, the rights of everybody on this planet. And we have to now get together and protect him to ensure that his sacrifice does not go to waste and that he is able to continue to do his work. It is critically important. I was not understating things when I said that he has saved the lives of multiple whistleblowers and at-risk journalists, some of whom you've heard about and some of whom you haven't. So to protect Julian's life is also to protect the life of those who he would assist and help to save in the future, as well, and in respect for those that he has in the past. So with that, I'm going to bow out now and go back to my little organising. Thank you all for being here and being a part of this. It's very exciting. I'd ask that you follow @Unity4J on Twitter, retweet all the amazing content that's being put out there, circulate all the information on our website, check out the Twitter accounts of our various participants and help to circulate and support their work as well, because they're amazing for coming and being a part of this for all of us. So now I'll hand over to Joe and I will add our first, I'll let you introduce her, but I'll add our first guest to the panel. Thank you so much, and that's all from me for today, guys. See you later.
Thank you very much, Suzie. Thank you. And you're going to go back to your very big organizing, not little organizing task. We're having up next Margaret Kimberly from Black Agenda Report. I don't see her up yet on the screen, but as soon as she appears, I'll have Margaret tell us about herself and why Julian Assange and WikiLeaks is important to her and why she thinks it's important to all of us.